Hey, Judge, how you doing?
Good.
I've been doing some homework on the grand jury system in America, and I was wondering on your opinion if you'd answer me some questions regarding it.
If I can.
There's a case called U.S. versus Williams. Antonin Scalia decided the case in 1992. And in there he goes on to say that being the grand jury is only mentioned in the Bill of Rights, it's solely in the hands of the people. And he goes on to say it serves as a buffer between the people and the government. And that the grand jury has the ability to use common sense, and that the grand jury, in the past, by doing searches, the grand jury used to be the investigative body for the people, almost like the police departments didn't have their own investigative. They would impanel a grand jury to investigate murders, arsons, and so on and so forth. Are you aware of this going on in the past, like early 1900s? Was this ever discussed in law school at all?
I don't. We talked about the grand jury in law school, but I never made a particular study of it. I have read a little history, though. The grand jury actually started. You know how far back it goes? It goes back to the Magna Carta. Remember the knights and earls and things like that got together and they made King John, who was an unpopular king in England, sign this Charter of Rights, and the grand jury system was guaranteed in the Magna Carta. As a matter of fact, I happened to be in, I think it was Philadelphia about a year or so ago, and I was at a museum, and they said, "Well, here, get in line, and you can see." It was the 2015, so it was the I guess the 800th hit anniversary of the Magna Carta, and you could actually see the Magna Carta. And I made a point to find that particular. I mean, it's really faded ink, but I looked to see whether it was in there because I told grand juries that. So I am familiar with the grand jury system. I also, we were talking about favorite presidents. My favorite president was Thomas Jefferson. So I read a little bit of history about Thomas Jefferson and the grand jury. He talked about that because it was important, especially as we became a new country. So I am familiar with the power of the grand jury. We impanel grand juries every month, and we give them their charter, and we tell them, you're not the agency of the court, you're not the agency of the police or the district attorney's office. You are a separate and independent body, and they take it from there. So we do empower the grand jury when we impanel them. So
Yeah, I was on a Dayton University website and searched the topic grand jury, and it said in the early 1900s, the grand jury actually fired its own district attorney, or its own attorney.
you can see that.
And, and then
The grand jury sometimes, I mean, the grand jury can call their own witnesses.
Yeah.
They sometimes vote. The district attorney doesn't say, "I want you to." Well, they say, "Here." Let's say there was a burglary case. They say, "Well, you could charge burglary in the first degree or criminal trespass or something like that." The grand jury can ignore that. They can no-bill the case.
Right.
I mean, the grand jury is a powerful, independent tool. It's a safeguard between us and government.
Actually, you want to know too that every county, every state has different regulations on how a grand jury is operated.
In all honesty,
and numbers of people.
Some states have abolished the grand jury system. There's no talk of doing that in New York State, thankfully.
so the grand jury can actually start their own investigations if they see fit, correctly, or are they limited by statute?
No. Well, they can investigate crimes. The grand jury can also investigate misconduct by public officials. We tell the grand jury that.
Does it have to be presented to them, Matt, or can it?
No, they could
do this on their own. Initiate on. Okay.
As a matter of fact, I think it was back in the late 70s, early 80s. It was before time I was involved in government, but there was a unfortunate mentally ill woman who killed her children, and there was an investigation. Well, why didn't the Department of Social Services take a step before this happened?
Yeah.
And so the grand jury actually investigated the circumstances surrounding that incident to see whether there was misconduct on the part of a government agency. So the grand jury can do that too.
Yeah, I heard that in Texas. I haven't found I heard it, that you can actually bring a complaint as a citizen right to the grand jury, where in other states you can't. You got to go through the district attorney. But hypothetically, say for example, if there's an issue with the district attorney, how does somebody access the grand jury directly anymore?
I'm not familiar with that Texas process.
Yeah.
Suppose you could write a letter to the foreperson of the grand jury and ask them to conduct an investigation.
And look into things.
In 16 years as district attorney, and now it's almost 10 years as a judge, I've never seen anybody do that.
Yeah. Have you heard any? Does jury nullification even exist anymore? Too. That's another part of the Constitution.
Well, as a judge, I'm aware that it exists. They tell us as judges don't encourage it. But I'm certainly aware, and I've certainly seen juries take things. I mean, just trial juries take things by their own hands and make their own decisions. But they tell us as judges, well, you don't want to encourage us.
Do you find it that maybe the jurors aren't as educated as they should be at law? Maybe so they have the authority to protect people from the government regarding nullification and the grand jury process and everything else. It just seems.
Good question. I am constantly amazed by the intelligence, and there's a wisdom or a common sense that people bring to the system, which is why I truly believe in the jury system. I mean, I don't say that jurors are ignorant. I would never say that. I think that they have their own special knowledge and wisdom. I'm a huge fan of the jury system.
Excellent.
And I'll tell you something else. There's many cases where I say to myself, I'd rather have these people decide
than a bench decision.
Yeah.
Takes the pressure off you, right?
In some ways.
Well, it also provides 12 different points of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
One.
we call them the conscience of the community.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing with the Magna Carta, it's nice you mentioned that. I'm impressed. That they usually had a grand jury of 25, and there's only 23 in our county grand jury. Is that?
It varies. It could be 13 to 26, Matt. Isn't that right?
Well, there has to be a quorum, so there has to be at least 16 members present to conduct business. I don't know the answer to the question of how we arrived at 23 in our in our state. Maybe I'll go back and see what I can find on that.
Do state grand juries even exist anymore, or just that?
Of course, yeah. As a matter of fact, state grand juries are more powerful and have a wider, more authority than federal grand juries. I don't know that federal grand juries can investigate misconduct in the federal government. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, and I used to be, a long time ago, I used to be an assistant U.S. attorney, so I presented cases to federal grand juries as well. Federal grand juries can consider hearsay. So in all honesty, what would happen a lot is an FBI agent would come in and say, I interviewed Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones said blah, 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 whereas the state grand jury has to hear directly from Mr. Jones. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for your call. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You bet. 2-9.
Thanks.